Hey Procrastinators! Today I have my fourth video in my Christmas series. I designed 3 different but somewhat similar Christmas cards for you. I was inspired by my friend Renee at Delaney Jane Cards and some of my friends over at the Collective Creators who use a bunch of fun pattern papers on their cards. If you're not familiar with the Collective Creators, you should check it out, and I will link to it below. I don't know why, but for some reason, I don't use a ton of pattern papers on my cards, unless they're box cards or something fancy like that I am cutting out with my Cricut. I have a ton of pattern paper, don't we all? I tend to hoard it though. So bad that my husband makes fun of me for it. Okay, so he may have a right to, since he's the one that helps me figure out storage, often being the one building me storage in my craft room. And he even once had to figure out how to tie 2 of those large wire 12 by 12 paper racks onto the top of our car when we were coming back from a trip. Oh, and I forgot to mention that we had a total of 7 people in our car, my grandma's motorized scooter tied to the roof rack as well, and everyone's luggage we had to contend with. Yeah, my husband deserves an award for putting up with me and my antics sometimes. Anyways, back to these cards for today. I'm making 3 different designs and 3 of each design. So for once, I actually planned in an organized manner. Oftentimes, I fly by the seat of my pants when making cards. That's probably obvious by how many times I've gotten close to the end and realized I have too much dimension on my cards to put my stamp in my positioner to stamp my sentiment. Anyways, I will only be showing the making of 1 of each card. You won't have to see the repetitiveness of each card being assembled. I started by stamping Merry Christmas from the Simon Says Stamp Inside Christmas Greetings set in Versamark on one of the slanted sentiment strip dies from My Favorite Things. I covered it in black detail embossing powder, and I heat set it with my heat tool off camera. Also off camera, I cut some snowman pattern paper from the Paper Studio Winterland paper pack at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I cut a circle and some snowflake pattern paper from the same paper pack using a circle die from the Neat and Tangled card front design die set. I cut a light blue cardstock strip just slightly smaller than half the width of the card front and die cut it with the Concord and 9th wintry edge dies. I cut and ink blended and assembled the snowman from the Spellbinder snowman die set as well. I laid them all out on my work surface in roughly the layout that I wished to place them in, and I got ready to assemble them with my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I glued the snowman to the middle of the snowflake pattern circle die cut. Then I decided that the exact placement that I wanted my Merry Christmas sentiment and adhered it flat down to the snowman patterned card front. Next I glued down the light blue cardstock with the snowflake bordered edge, making sure that I lined the straight edge of that piece with the straight edge of my card front. Before adhering my snowman that is attached to the snowflake circle, I wanted a smaller secondary sentiment, so I popped the card front into my stamp positioner, added the anti-static powder to the area in which I was going to stamp, applied Versamark to my stamp, and stamped the Warm Wishes stamp from Simon Says Stamp's Tiny Word Christmas stamp set. I covered that in black detail embossing powder as well and heat set that off camera. Once done with that, I applied X-Fasten foam tape to the back of the snowman piece, and I attached him to the card front in such a way that he covered up the part of the banner that was showing through the snowflake cutouts in the blue piece. After I finished the card front, I stamped the inside of the cards with the sentiment, Joyful Wishes and Warm Holiday Hugs, from Simon Says Stamp's Inside Christmas Greeting stamp set in Stampin' Up's Bashful Blue ink. Then I simply attached my card front to my card base, made out of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock, using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. To finish off the card, I coated the snowman in Nuvo Aqua Shimmer Pen in glitter gloss, but for some reason today I had a difficult time getting the shimmer to show up in the video. Usually I can just tilt it in my lights and get it to show up fairly well. Moving on to the Santa card, I started by stamping a Merry Christmas sentiment from the Simon Says Stamp Inside Christmas Greeting stamp set on these fairly thin strips of striped pattern paper from the Craft Perfect Merry and Bright 6x6 paper pad. I cut the strips into 1-inch strips and then I cut them in half using the strip dies from the Tim Holtz Alteration Stitched Rectangle set so that they had a stitch detail on them and were now only 1/2 inch or so. Off camera, I cut my card fronts out of some Santa pattern paper from the Paper Studio Winter Wonderland paper pack at 4¼ by 5½. A teal piece of cardstock using the Tim Holtz Alteration Stitched rectangle dies, in which I stamped and heat embossed Ho 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 from Simon Says Stamps Tiny Words Christmas stamp set, and I cut, ink blended, and assembled Santa from the Spellbinders Santa die set. I laid them all out on my work surface in roughly the layout that I wished to place them in, and I got ready to assemble them with my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. Again, I adhered them in assembly line fashion, but like I said earlier, I cut out the footage of me assembling all but one of the cards. I started by adhering Santa to the stitched rectangle die cut, just slightly above the Ho 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 embossed sentiment. Next, I played around with the layout for a second to decide exactly where I wanted my placement. Once I made a final decision, I glued down the horizontal strip, then the vertical strip with the Merry Christmas sentiment. The vertical strip was cut slightly longer than my card front, so I will cut those edges off later. I applied X-Fasten foam tape to the back of my Santa piece, and I adhered him to my card front. Moving on to the inside of the card, I used Stampin' Up's Rose Red ink to stamp the sentiment, "Wishing you a wonderful Christmas," from Simon Says Stamps Inside Christmas Greeting Stamp Set. Lastly, I applied my card front to the Neenah Solar White 110-pound card base. Lastly, we have the reindeer card. I started by stamping Merry Christmas from Simon Says Stamp Inside Christmas Greeting Stamp Set in Versamark ink on a striped pattern paper from the Paper Studio Winter Wonderland paper pack that was cut with the Spellbinders Card Creator Scalloped Border Dies 2 die set. I covered the stamped sentiment in detailed brass embossing powder, and then I heat set it off camera. I probably should have done this in a different color, as it does blend in a little bit. It shows better in person, though, than it does on camera, but it is what it is. Off camera, I cut my card fronts out of some Christmas character pattern paper from the Paper Studio Winter Wonderland paper pack at 4¼ by 5½. A green cardstock piece with the Spellbinders Fleur-de-Lis square die set, and cut, inked, and assembled the reindeer from the Spellbinders reindeer die set. I laid them all out on my work surface in roughly the layout that I wished to place them in, and I got ready to assemble them with the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. Again, I adhered these in assembly line fashion, but like I said earlier, I cut out the footage of me assembling all but one of the cards. I started by adhering the reindeer to the center of the Fleur-de-Lis square die cut. I then adhered the Card Creator Scalloped Border die cut to the front of the card, making sure that I aligned the straight edge of the die cut to the straight edge of my card front panel. Next, I popped the reindeer up on some X-Fasten foam tape and adhered it to my card front. Moving on to the inside of the card, I stamped the sentiment, "May you enjoy the magic of the season, the love of family, and the new year ahead of you," from Simon Says Stamps Inside Christmas Greeting Stamp Set in Always Artichoke from Stampin' Up. If you can't tell, this stamp set is becoming a favorite this season. Finishing off the card by adhering my card front to my Neenah Solar White 110-pound card base with the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I had so much fun mixing and matching pattern papers and fun-shaped dies. I hope that you enjoyed another video in my Christmas series and can take away some inspiration for your Christmas cards. How far are you on your Christmas cards? Are you done? Have you started? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed my video today, I would greatly appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. As always, have a great day!